Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles and welcome to Power Talk, my podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. I cover topics related to spirituality, hypnocoaching, and the hypnotic arts and sciences generally. If you'd like to know more about my work, check out my website, which I'll tag at the end of this video. Today I want to talk about why I think philosophy is important. Now, full disclosure, I hold 2 degrees, a bachelor's and a master's degree in philosophy, both from the University of Connecticut, so I'm biased. But you know people you admire. We all have people we admire. For me, the people I admire tend to be the lovers of wisdom. These are people who are always looking to understand more, to understand better, to expand who they are as a person, until finally, at the end of life, I believe, we expand to become everything. And philosophy can help us do that. Now, philosophy has historically had something of a rough reputation, and philosophers have had a rough time. The main value of philosophy is that it facilitates clear thinking by making meaningful distinctions. However, the reality is that this is a service that a lot of people don't appreciate. They kind of like the muddy thinking they were doing. When you intervene to help explain a mistaken thought that someone was making because they had blurred a category or misunderstood something or committed a logical fallacy that they didn't recognize, they don't tend to thank you for that. But nevertheless, it's important that we do think clearly. In the history of philosophy, the great philosopher Socrates was condemned to death by the citizens of ancient Athens for corrupting the youth. And that corruption was he was teaching them to think critically. And their parents did not appreciate that. But be that as it may, philosophy opens the mind to possibilities. A story from early in my first marriage comes to mind. I was talking to my in-laws and my brother and sister-in-law, and they didn't understand that a lot of things in even mathematics are matters of definition. So I said, well, why do you think we have 360 degrees in a circle? Because there just are, they said. Well, but why? I mean, we can divide a geometric circle up into as many units as we want. Why not units of 100 so geometry can be done in base 10? The answer to the question is that we have 360 degrees in a circle because geometry began in ancient Babylonia and the Babylonians counted in base 6. So I was explaining this to my in-laws, and they looked at me like I was talking about being abducted by aliens. They had never even attempted to let their minds go in that area. They'd never entertained the thought that there could be something other than 360 degrees in a circle. They just uncritically accepted it as if, God had commanded such a thing. People do that, uncritically accept as fact things which are not necessarily immutable laws. Philosophy helps you understand that. Another benefit is you improve yourself by hearing the many voices that are out there. Philosophies don't always agree on what is good or praiseworthy, and when you study them, you can get surprised when you start to think through things and come upon opinions that you hadn't considered before. For example, is the good the greatest good for the greatest number of people? A lot of people would argue that. But other people would argue that every individual has rights, that should be protected, even if they're not in the interests of the greater good for the greater number of people. Now, there's no clear answer to that conundrum, but you benefit by wrestling with it. And we need to have a path through life, a practical philosophy. If we just make things up as we go along, we're going to end up contradicting and embarrassing ourselves or being unfair to others. There are three principal reasons for that. First, self-deception is a common human trait. We are descended from animals, and in that part of our nature, we're not always clear about our own motivations. I was at my doctor's office and I watched a patient ahead of me who got up on the scale to be weighed in. And this guy was a big guy with a big belly out in front of him. And he sucked the belly in before he got up on the scale. Well, dude, that's self-deception. Holding your belly in isn't going to make you weigh any less. It doesn't matter if your belly is sucked in or hanging over your belt. It's still there, and it's still going to weigh whatever it weighs. So pulling the belly in, just deceiving himself to try to believe he was in better shape than he was. It's easy to believe what you want to believe. That doesn't mean it's true. The second reason that we have for needing to be careful about not making things up as we go along is that all philosophies are not created equal. Someone who, for example, is a racist, well, yeah, they've got principles that underlie their thinking. It's just that the principles kind of suck big time. One thing philosophy teaches you to do is to ask yourself the question, what would the world be like if everyone did what I think the right thing to do is? And in the case of a racist, we would have constant race wars if everyone behaved in a racist way. So that's not something you can universalize. So all principles are not created equal. And bringing your principles under examination is in your best interest. And the third point's kind of related to the second. Intellectual laziness is easy. People routinely will contradict themselves and not realize it because they haven't thought things through. I saw a photograph on social networking the other day of a guy getting a tattoo. And the tattoo was a passage from the 18th chapter of the book of Leviticus, a section of that book in the Old Testament that's often used to condemn homosexuality. I don't think that's the correct interpretation, but it's often used for that. And this fellow was so anti-homosexual, he was having that verse tattooed on his arm and probably thought of himself as very righteous for doing that. But you see, the next chapter in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, contains a commandment about not getting tattoos. Talk about contradictions. Easy to do if you don't think things through. I had one fellow who's a client who says, I don't need any of your goddamn philosophy. I have the 10 Commandments. And seemed very satisfied with himself for saying that. Of course, by saying goddamn philosophy, he was violating the second commandment about taking the name of God in vain. If we don't think these things through, we end up making mistakes. We'll mess ourselves up, and we'll mess others up as well. Living by a consistent set of principles, very important, but also very hard to do. It's not going to happen by accident. The people I admire are people who, as the phrase says, who walk their talk, who behave in a way that matches what they say they believe. Now that phrase, walk your talk, first appeared in United States newspapers in the 1920s, but it probably refers back to Socrates. Socrates and his students were called the peripatetic philosophers. Peripatetic is a Greek word for walking, because they would walk around and discourse with each other. And walking your talk means, being consistent, honorable, saying what you mean, meaning what you say, and so on. And your talk, therefore, needs to be walkable, which means it can't be inconsistent. And as I've said earlier, that will not happen by accident. So I recommend the study of philosophy. Read some books, take a course or two, talk to someone who can guide you. A lot of therapists, a lot of clergy, and not a few hypnotists have some training and experience in this area, and they can help you untangle a mess that you might have in your mind and get things in an orderly presentation so you know what you believe and can walk your talk effectively. Hey, thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject, and I invite you to join me. It does help me if you let others know about my videos, so please like, share, and subscribe. And if I can be of help to you, feel free to reach out through email, my website, or my Patreon channel. Stay well and stay safe.